Let's talk about one of the most, debated verses in the Quran, the one about the punishment for theft. For centuries, the common understanding is pointed to physical amputation. But what if a closer look at the language itself reveals something completely different? Okay, let's dive into this and see where the words actually take us.
And really, this is the question at the very heart of it all. How do you square the idea of a compassionate, all-wise God with a punishment that seems so severe, so permanent? It's a huge theological hurdle, and the search for an answer actually begins in a very, very personal place. So the scholar who re-examined all this had to get a minor surgery on his hand, and for a while, he was basically helpless. That simple experience, just losing the function of one hand temporarily, it sparked this massive question in his mind. Could God's plan really be to inflict this kind of helplessness on someone for life? And that personal moment, well, it kicked off a deep, deep dive into the language of the Quran.
All right, so the investigation starts with the very first keyword, hands, or al-aidi in the original Arabic. Now, we all just assume it means, our physical hands. But does it always? Let's see how the Quran uses this exact same word in other places. Here we go. Here's our first big clue. The Quran describes Prophet David as the possessor of al-aidi. Now, right away, that makes you ask a pretty simple question, doesn't it?
I mean, come on, did Prophet David have a bunch of extra arms? No way. Of course not. Thinking that would be completely absurd. So this verse is obviously using the word in a metaphorical way. So if al-aidi doesn't mean physical hands here, what does it mean?
Well, it turns out that al-aidi refers to someone who has strength, power, and abilities given to them by God. So David wasn't a man of many limbs, he was a man of immense power and capability. And just like that, a whole new way of understanding this word opens up.
And this isn't some random one-off thing. This pattern is all over the Quran. You see Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob described as possessors of strength and vision. The verb for God supporting Prophet Muhammad, it comes from the exact same root. And that famous line, "Do not throw yourselves with your own hands into destruction," that's not just about your limbs. It's about not using your power, your resources, your capabilities to bring about your own ruin.
So here's the takeaway from our first clue. The word aidi is flexible. It can mean a physical hand, or it can mean power and capability. And the only thing that tells you which one it is the context. That's a huge piece of the puzzle. Now let's move on to the second clue.
Okay, now for the second key word, the verb to cut, or kata. And just like with hands, our first instinct is to think it means physical cutting, severance. But again, we got to ask the question, is that the only way the Quran uses this word?
Whoa! Okay, check out this verse. It says that God cut up a group of people and scattered them across the world as different nations. Just think about that for a second. Is this verse saying God literally chopped people into pieces and threw their body parts around the globe? Of course not. That's a horrifying and nonsensical way to read it. Here, cut clearly means to sever ties, to break up a group, to disperse them. It's a non-physical kind of cutting.
And this right here shows perfectly why context is king. You have the famous story of the women in Egypt who were so stunned by Prophet Joseph's beauty that they cut their hands. In that story, there's a huge contextual clue. A knife is specifically mentioned. That tool locks the meaning into a physical action. But in the verse about theft, there's no mention of a tool at all. None. And that silence is deafening. It basically forces us to consider the non-physical meaning.
Okay, so now it's time to put it all together. Let's combine our two clues. We've got hands, that can mean capabilities, and cut, that can mean to stop or to sever. When you put those two ideas together, the verse on theft, well, it completely transforms.
Suddenly, the phrase "faqta'u aydiyahuma" is not a command to amputate a body part. It becomes an instruction to the authorities to sever the thieves' power to steal, to cut off their means and their capability to commit the crime again. The punishment is aimed at the ability to do harm, not the body of the person.
And get this, there's another tiny detail here that's actually huge. The verse uses a specific form of the word hands that points to the full range of capabilities of both thieves, the man and the woman. It's not about just one hand like in the old interpretation. It's about completely shutting down their entire criminal operation. So, what does that actually look like in the real world? Well, it's incredibly practical and modern. Step 1. You confiscate their tools, whether that's weapons, getaway cars, or hacking equipment. Step 2. You restrict their ability to operate,
maybe through surveillance or, if it's serious, through imprisonment. And step 3, especially for organized crime, you dismantle their entire network. You break up the gang. That is how you truly cut off their hands.
So where does this leave us? We've arrived at a conclusion that isn't just more logical, it feels much more in line with the Quran's overarching message. It's an understanding of justice that actually fits with the ideas of wisdom and mercy.
Think about it. The goal is no longer about vengeance. It's about protecting society and, just as importantly, allowing for reform. Instead of creating a disabled person who might become a permanent burden on their community, you're actually stopping the crime, keeping people safe, and leaving the door open for rehabilitation.
And here's the best part. The final piece of the puzzle clicks right into place when you look at how the verse itself ends. It concludes by describing God as almighty, all-wise, a punishment that surgically removes the ability to do harm while preserving the person. Well, that sounds an awful lot like a punishment designed with profound wisdom, doesn't it? It's mighty in its effect and wise in its application.
And we should mention this entire line of linguistic analysis and this thoughtful re-examination comes from the incredible work of Khalid Al-Sayed Hassan.
So, we end with a question for you. What we've just walked through shows how taking a fresh, context-first look at the original text can totally change our understanding of a very difficult verse. So if an idea as old and established as this one can be seen in a completely new light, what other inherited ideas, what other interpretations that we just take for granted might be waiting for our own fresh reflection?